Hi there, I'm Jorge Ortiz and I'm a developer evangelist at Oracle, and this is the second video about note-taking. In this video, I will explain how to take notes, or at least how I take my notes. In contrast to what I did in the previous one, that I shared with you some reasons on why taking notes is useful and a few rules of thumb on when to take a note. Is this interesting to you? So let's get cracking. Taking notes is one of those things where perfect is the enemy of good. And probably you're already polluted by some notes that you have seen on the internet, and they have beautiful drawings, many colors, wonderful calligraphy. And then you take your pen and a piece of paper and you see what you can do, and it doesn't match that. Welcome to my world. But good news is that it is better to have crappy notes than having no notes at all. So my advice is to start somewhere and start taking notes of whatever you want. But being pragmatic here is a plus, and this is why I decided to use digital notes rather than handwritten ones. I occasionally take some handwritten notes. It's good for transcribing your thoughts into some flow. But I believe that the digital notes have a lot of advantages. But wait, don't go. Stay here, because I'm going to explain why I believe digital notes are far superior in my case. Let me give you 3 reasons why digital notes are, in my case, superior to handwritten ones. You might not share them all, but I hope they make sense to you. So let me start at the beginning. First reason is that I am reasonably comfortable with touch typing. I am using a keyboard most of my day, and I usually have keyboards around. So even though I'm not the fastest typist, my typing is good enough to keep up with my thoughts. The second reason is that I want to modify my notes, to add things to them, to change things that were wrong initially. And in order to do that, I have to go back to the note and edit it. And that is much easier with a digital note than with a handwritten one, because you don't have to do anything fancy to keep it clean. You just delete what is wrong and you put the new stuff, and it looks as good as the first time. And the third reason would be that it is far easier to exploit them, because finding the note that you took about something when you have a lot of notebooks where you have written your thoughts is harder than doing a search in a directory of text files. And there are many other ways in which you can exploit them, and the next video will be about that. But at the very least, for that use case, handwritten notes are inferior to digital notes. Now that I have explained myself on why I use digital notes rather than handwritten ones, let me explain some things that I do in order to take notes. And the first thing would be to make it possible. And there are many aspects to do that, but the first thing that comes to mind is that I am usually surrounded by keyboards. I work with a computer the whole day, and I usually have a keyboard under my fingertips, or I am very close to one. So having a computer surrounding you is something that will be helpful for taking your digital notes. If you don't do that, you have to find alternative ways of capturing your ideas. But once you have decided to use your computer, you also have to choose which tool you're going to use in order to take your notes. And there is a big spectrum of options in the market. Some people prefer to use note-taking apps like Obsidian, OneNote, or Keep, or any others. And that's perfectly fine, a good option. Some other people, like myself, prefer to go with text editor. And then you can use the best option, which is Emacs, or you can go with an inferior one like VS Code or Vim. Just kidding. But whatever your choice is, it has to be something that you feel comfortable with. My advice number one on this is that they have to be text-based, because you can then be able to exploit them in a much easier way, and you are not locked by the platform. But we'll talk about this on the next video when we will cover how to exploit the knowledge that you have on your notes. The thing is that whichever tool you use, whether you go with a text editor or you go with a note-taking application, you have to verify that it provides you with the things that you need in order to take good notes. And that means that it will have some kind of way to offer templates, and probably also to provide you with snippets. And the idea behind these two is, for the first one, for the templates, to keep the structure and simplify the boilerplate. And that is useful because then you don't have to think about the structure of a note for a recipe. You know that the ingredients are first, then the steps for cooking, and then the serving advice. For the snippets, they are meant to simplify your typing and sometimes like make very fast something that it would take you a while to type when there's no need for that. So whatever you use, you have to have something like that in your tool. In my case, in Emacs, I use Capture for the templates, and I use Temple for the snippets. Another thing that you have to do to make it possible is to design and use your workflows. There are a limited number of operations that you're going to repeat very often, that you're going to do once and again, like creating a note or searching for one or establishing a relation between two. And for all of these things, I hope that the tool that you have chosen has some kind of functionality, some feature that simplifies doing that. And if they do, I think that the best option is to learn this functionality by heart, to use it. You don't have to type a regular expression in order to do a search and so on, but rather simplify the process to the maximum so you can do that task and come back to whatever you were doing before taking your note. Even better, if you can trigger these features by using a shortcut, my advice is that you learn these shortcuts by heart. And I know that this is challenging for some people, it is for me, but I think that the best option is to choose a couple of them per week and then try to use them all the time. Let me remind you that these are operations that you do frequently, so you will have to train your muscle memory by using them once and again. And once you have used them through the whole week, and every time you catch yourself not using them, you go back, you undo the operation and try to do it again using the shortcut, then after a week, most likely you have learned these shortcuts by heart. And then since you're going to keep on using them, you will retain them. I know it may sound scary, but sometimes we don't have computers around. Still, when we do activities that require no computers around, we still have ideas and we want to capture them. And in my case, I often go for a walk, and it's a very good occasion, not only for exercising my body, but also for thinking about anything that comes to mind from a different perspective, something that would be much harder to do if I stay at my desk. And those ideas that are usually like the best ones I have, which is not much, but those ideas, I want to keep them. I want to keep track of them. And in order to do that, I could use my phone and start typing on my phone whatever I thought. But this is not usually very safe when you're walking around, and I prefer things that are easier. So I record my notes. I use audio notes, and I have a mic like this one anyone could do to have a better quality on the audio that you record. And then I transcribe them when I am back home into text, and I decide whether I want to use them or not. In many occasions, I discard them. I dismiss the content of that note because I have already started taking a note that is a new version of that thought. But in the few occasions that I have needed them, it is a blessing to have your voice recorded with the thoughts that you had, so you can come back to them when you need them. But not everything that you want to capture is suitable for audio. Sometimes you want to describe a graph or an image or a diagram, and it is much easier to go with the actual image. So I draw them wherever, like I take some napkin and a pen, or if I have a small notebook with me, I use that, or even on the sand if I need to, in order to draw whatever is needed. I take a picture of it with my phone, and then I can use that picture later on as the starting point for a proper diagram or proper mind map or whatever. Making it possible is important, but it is also important to establish some kind of order in the notes that you are going to take. Probably the nature of the things that you want to capture is not always the same. Let's say that you want to capture recipes and to keep track of your progress in a project. There are two different types of notes. In one, their structure is going to be very well established. You're going to have some ingredients, the cooking steps, and the serving advice. And on the other, you're going to have like a series of events that describe a part of the progress on that project. So it is a good exercise to decide which kinds of notes you are interested in and what is going to be the structure for them. Also, to establish some kind of naming for these notes. In my case, I use the first three letters to decide which type of note it is. So if it is a checklist, if it is a how-to, if it is a recipe, or if it is a log for a project. And also, I have notes that don't exactly match these rules. For example, when I have a meeting, I prefer to start with the date of the meeting, starting with the year, then the month, and then the day. It doesn't have to be those criteria, but the ones that apply to you, but choose the ones that you are going to use and document them in a single note or two notes. So you can come back to those and refer to these at the beginning. You will be using them more often. After a while, you will only add there a few modifications that you feel that they are missing. Independently of how fancy the tools that you're using are, don't forget that the purpose here is to capture notes and use them later. So don't get lost in the details of creating fancy notes that can do many things and nice animations and whatever. My first advice to avoid having the medium getting in the way of taking notes is to start with plain text. Use a plain text format. You can use some kind of markup. In my case, I use OR mode. But the reason here is similar to the one that applies when you are writing an essay or some write-up, that if you start too early with the details, you don't advance, you don't do any progress on that. It is much better to capture the flow of whatever you're thinking, the important details, and then you can come back and add formatting later on. So just basically put the minimum structure there, like the headings, and if something has to be bold because you want to emphasize that, maybe add that, but don't be too fancy on the format. Like this is not a word processor, and you don't need to use many different types of fonts in order to make your notes fancy. And as I said, in my case, I use org mode that provides you with basic formatting. Is similar to Markdown. It is built in Emacs, and it is like Markdown on steroids. But if you prefer to go with Markdown or any other markup formats that are available, just go with them. Choose your format and stay with it, because you're going to use it, and it is much easier if you keep your notes in the same format. This may not apply to every type of note, but I recommend you to use a three-step process in order to capture your notes, particularly when they are about things that you are creating in your mind, that you're thinking about them, but they are not fully defined. It will be helpful to start with an outline that captures the main points of whatever you're considering. Whatever those are at the moment that you're capturing, you can modify them later. And then the second step would be to add some detail to each one of the entries in your outline. And then you go through a third step, refining all the different parts of your notes and adding all the details that are necessary there. This is helpful to keep track of the whole idea and then distill this idea in a way that is more useful to you. So far, we have been talking about text notes, but don't be cheap. I mean, you know that images are worth 1,000 words, and so are diagrams, mind maps, and so on. So use them. When they're useful, you can benefit from them, insert them in your notes by adding a link to the file that contains this image or this diagram. If you do that, my advice is to follow two rules. The first one is that you include some text description to the link that is referring to the diagram. Basically, it will help you when you search for information if you have a text description of that diagram, that image, that picture, whatever. The second thing is that if you're using another application to create this diagram, you also create a reference to the original file that is used to create the image, the mind map, or whatever. So if you need to refresh it, if you need to do some changes or update it, then you will have the possibility to go to the original file, make the modifications, export that in a format that you can import in the notes as a plain image, and use it. I have been using computers for a few years now, and initially I thought that it would be possible to have the perfect hierarchy of folders, one that I can use to put a file in its place and find it later. I have realized that I was wrong, and that's not possible because usually you are using different criteria to search for the same information. And what you want to do is to do searches independently of just a single topic. So same thing applies to pictures, for example. Let's say that you put pictures based on the event and the date, and you say like last year birthday, and you store all the pictures there. But then you want to do a search for pictures that have an emotion, like they are about a happy moment or a sad moment, or pictures that have a strong prevalence of a color, like blue or red or orange, or pictures where somebody of your friends or family is in order to create an album for this person. All these criteria are as valid as the event and the date that you use in order to classify the original pictures. So it is much better to add labels to these files, same thing for notes and the information, so you can search by these labels later on. And it depends on the format that you choose, but in my case, ORG mode has the capability to store metadata at the beginning of the file, or actually anywhere, and you can use that metadata later on with ripgrep or with grep in order to find the proper notes that refer to these keywords that you're using or tags. So my advice is to add this metadata when you are creating your notes because they will be helpful to conduct searches through the whole knowledge base that you have. A final bit of advice. When you're capturing your note, include the sources. And there are a couple of reasons why you want to do that. If you have learned from some source how to do something, chances are that you want to come back to the source, the original source of information later on, in order to verify that your notes were right, that are still valid, that it has some additional information that you didn't capture. So being aware of where the information comes from is usually something that you want to do. Not only that, if this is something that you learn by yourself, it's also nice to capture it, because then you can say, well, this is what I thought at the time, or this is based on the experiments I did at the time, but I might have been wrong at that time and I have captured things that are not complete or not right. So it is useful to have this description in your note in order to understand what the quality of the information is. Okay, so these are a few tips that I wanted to share with you regarding note-taking. I hope they have been useful. In the next episode, I will be talking about exploiting the knowledge of your notes. Let's keep in mind that the purpose here is to create an AI tool that is going to help us in the exploitation of our knowledge base. And we are going to do that using AI Optimizer and Toolkit, that is an open source and freely available project that you can use. And we're going to create that tool from scratch in the next episode. So stay curious, hack your code. See you next time.